We heard many times that neoclassical economics is not compatible with the world today. Yes, basically because the real world is open and dynamic, and neoclassical economics is not a good description of the stakeholders in the economy and how they think and interact in this world. Today, I will show you what these dynamic variables are and a theory of how they interact. My aim is to add to the ontology that we rely on when thinking about economic concepts in general. So, doing a few speed tests with an automobile gives an accurate functional relationship between pressure on the gas throttle and speed of the car, right? But if you want to understand how a car works, that relationship won't help much. It leaves these core mechanisms a mystery, and the relationship breaks down as soon as there's a change in any part of the car. So we have to start from the idea that our world and the things in it, the institutions, the people, the mindsets and so on, are subject to changes and shifts. Now we know neoclassical economics is too narrowly defined, too static to include these. What I want to do is I want to split the development of humankind's coordination into a few periods. How many periods aren't important. I just want to indicate the dynamics of how we think and act. That's all I'm going to do. So where do we start? I want to start as early as human perspective shifted to change something in the environment that created a new way of interacting with the world, which is usually aimed at reducing effort in satisfying a need. For example, making a tool or coding an app, and the tool or app made life easier. As soon as this cycle is present, economic analysis is possible. So, where do we start? So, we start over here, nomadic society. They only knew basic needs, goods and services didn't exist, just social interaction with others and a few basic things that nature provided autonomously and freely. They lived in harmony with the world, valued equality and sharing, and it's this culture and goals that plays an important part in economic systems. Lots remained undiscovered, and the possibilities that it would afford and the changes that it would bring, but they didn't have a pressing need for it because they were unaware. When they found ways to alter their environment to satisfy their needs easier, the new environment led to new needs. And their view of the world and their own possibilities slowly changed. So, private ownership became common, sharing less common, we were divided between those who own the land and those who work on it. Autonomous supply by nature became dependent on agriculture and trade. A need for power also emerged in this time, with church and state being one and empires expanding. Then industrialization changed the rules again. Enlightenment brought an end to the Dark Ages, a new platform, companies. They commoditized things into goods and services, market it to create a need, and supply it to you if you have adequate effective demand. See, we see all these new concepts applicable to this specific period. The perspective is work. The goal is growth at all costs, and some economies are still stuck here. Then I won't go through these, but the new goal became sustainable development. And now supply is becoming automated. We need and consume information, which is often free. Ideas like labor and production functions lost its logic. It's not about output, but rather what's afforded by certain things. I call this a thing. You can't really call it a product or a service. It's a combination of so many different things that affords you to do different things. And many of these things are free to the user because it's networked supply. Like who really supplies who and with what. Information in this time is changing our perception dramatically. And our goal, keeping up with this information. And the economy is becoming so creative that it makes economists scratch their heads. Alright, so these successive systems each saw reality in their own way. Each way was taken as a new snapshot in economic history. We can't build economics on new static principles of this current age, or we will have the same problem as classical economics. We don't want another snapshot ontology, we want a dynamic ontology. Other times don't have the environment, the institutions, the concepts or their goals, assumed by neoclassical economics. Their focus is limited to what their accepted methodology can measure. All else is assumed constant or exogenous. Now, if they find the answers to their world in demand and supply of goods and services, where lies the answers to the real world? In your needs. Not just a specific set of needs considered by orthodox economics, but a range of things and concepts that humans can spend time pursuing, because all of these influence opportunity cost, time spending, and economic decisions. The second variable is the things in the environment that satisfies all of these needs. Look, how we define our environment and see ourselves interact with what's around us is the core of economics. Our environment determines what's possible and what's not. It's where we work, we play, and we create. The classical view of the environment focuses on goods and services of industry and government, but there's so much more in the environment that impacts opportunity cost, time, and decisions. So the orthodoxy leaves a gap in explaining the real world and fails to capture everything that has value to us in our lives. So we need a more widely defined concept, applicable regardless of time that you're in. Then we also have this perception that weaves itself throughout our development. It allows us to see possibilities that others didn't, like the Enlightenment that brought an end to the Dark Ages and sparked the Industrial Revolution. Perception has even been included in some growth models. Robert Solow once said that all economic activity is embedded in a web of social institutions, customs, belief, and economics attitudes. Is there anything that can help us to create a coherent, workable theory of how these three variables interact? There is. Gibson's theory of affordances. It was originally introduced in ecology to describe how an animal interacts with its environment, but it's been used in design, in IT, in robotics. It's perfect to apply to a dynamic economic landscape since it explains how we perceive value in our niche. In ecology, each organism, humans included, lives in a constantly evolving niche. A niche is a way of life. If we apply this to economics, the niche would be the real world as it evolves. Affordance theory study identifies all the specific things or features of the environment that afford something to the organism. It's that concept we were looking for there, see? It would be a different partition of our world than what we're used to from economics. It doesn't start with the assumptions. It gives a complete picture of everything the organism can spend time on pursuing or can possibly need, and how this changes through time. Features of the niche could be products, services, the internet, conference events, social media platforms, anything that affords something to you. Gibson says, in our environment, affordances represent latent possibilities, independent of the individual's ability to recognize them, but always in relation to the individual. Like transportation, independent of whether the wheel is covered yet. He says these affordances become active given the, quote, physical capabilities of the actors, their goals, beliefs, and past experiences. When we apply this idea to economics, it refers to the environment that unfolds in creative destruction, where one discovery leads to the next. It also means that your perspective determines when you engage with some of the things in your environment. Like how enlightenment led to a more critical mind that allowed the industrial age. The theory has never been applied to economics, but it just fits the variables like a glove. Look, the hierarchy from Maslow, or this lesser-known unending spiral from Dr. Gray, implies that needs have some sequence, right? Affordance theory treats needs as latent in the human psyche, where the satisfaction of one need, after effecting a change in perspective, leads to the activation of the next, which feeds into your experience and goals and beliefs in the quote earlier. The theory gives us the rules of how these three variables interact. It also explains business models effortlessly. Starbucks isn't just about the coffee, but about all the other things it affords to you. A collection of event and physical features. When Starbucks closed in Australia, it's because people didn't yet see these affordances. Australians needed time to change their perspective. If there's a known affordance, which you don't have access to, we have an unsettled need. If there's an unknown affordance, there's not yet a need. Then you're unaware, like the nomads or the Australians. Affordances are facts of the environment. They're unlimited, waiting to be discovered. So are your needs. See, it offers a new ontology where our focus turns to the variables responsible for change, instead of the transitory phenomena resulting from change. So how does this ontology from affordance theory and the three variables allow us to describe the real dynamic world? Well, instead of definitions of economics connected to each view, we can have a type of functional definition. To distinguish between the many static views of economics, let's represent those with a small letter e followed by a constant, and the dynamic view of economics with a capital letter E. Orthodox definition says economics is a study of unlimited needs and scarce resources. Yes, in that constant point in time, with a certain set of needs and states of development in the environment, the perception was that economics is the study of endless needs and scarce resources. It was all about the set of needs from industrial era perception and the environmental features that they considered according to their perspective, represented by active affordances. But definitions shouldn't just focus on one perspective. So economics is equal to everything from 1 up to infinity to include all perspectives, that's the P, that could impact our needs and affordances. And then we can represent the collection of small letters with capital letters just to simplify a bit. Everything in the economic world, every activity, advance and opinion is the result of a dynamically interacting creative force between your needs and the affordances. That's our dynamic definition of economics. We can look at all these neoclassical industrial age concepts that's lost its logic and see in what way we can reclassify it, identify them, clarify them according to the new ontology, and classify them in a dynamic, creative way. I hope people can think less about supply and demand in a production function, less about static classifications of goods and services, and think more about access to affordances, about affordances being either active or latent. For example, we can classify environmental features into groups according to their specific attributes, which shows the shift from autonomous supply to dependent supply and onwards to automated or networked supply, to give insight into the workings of the real world. We can do many other things with this new ontology, but there you have it, a new ontology to keep in mind when thinking about economic concepts. Thank you very much.